Hello, welcome to a new episode of Grief to Gratitude. I'm so excited today to be able to share with you. I have my friend Christine here with me, and she is a precious friend. It's been a while since we had a video, but we're ready now, and we're not going to let anything stand in our way. So, today, Christine is going to tell you a little bit about herself, and then I want to read something from the Word, and then we'll go on with her story.
Oh, Debbie, trying to get this video out has been
It's been a
it's
challenge.
been a challenge. We definitely have had the enemy, working on us in terms of getting this video. But I will tell you, I and you know this. I do photography as a hobby. I'm always behind the camera. I'm not one to be in front of the camera, and so this has been a challenge for me. But at the same time, when you ask me. Um, I was like, oh no, Debbie, and then you asked me to pray about
Yeah.
it. So, I prayed about it. And then I ran into a friend that I hadn't seen in a very long time. And she said, we were talking, and she said her word that came to her was testimony and the importance of kind of getting your story out there and sharing your story. And I was like, oh, Debbie. So here we are, to share some of my story. It's a part of my story, a big part of my story, regarding my sister and grief that comes along with mental illness.
Mhm.
And so, yeah,
Yeah.
it's, and I think mental illness today, we're more aware of mental
Yeah.
illness. People are
That's
now
it.
finally talking about it and realizing it. There's not a stigma. I mean, it's
Right.
chemical imbalances that some people cannot, you know, um, you know, but at the same time, it's a serious disease,
Right.
and there's grief associated with it, and losing those relationships that you had
Yeah.
prior to the mental illness,
Hmm.
and so we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like today.
Well, I know that it's a real thing, and I know that it's a almost an epidemic right now,
Mm-hmm.
and we are recognizing it more. Before, we didn't recognize it for what it was, but there it's such a tragedy in so many ways because for the families that are there for those who are suffering from mental illness, it breaks their hearts, and they sometimes feel like they don't know what to do or their hands are tied. And for those who don't have family, many times they end up on the street
Mm-hmm.
or in jail or places that they really should be somewhere where they can be treated, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so we have, recognized someone with mental illness in your family, it is a loss and it is a time of grieving. And it says in my Bible here, there's a commentary, and it says, in the midst of loss and grief, we may be tempted to doubt God's goodness. And that's true. We say, God, sometimes where are you? And why did this have to happen, or why is it this way? But we aren't always offered an explanation. But as a caregiver, I was a caregiver for my mom and dad who got some dementia at the end,
Mm-hmm.
but they also had medical problems. So, myself, my husband, my sisters, my brother, sisters in law, we
Mm-hmm.
all worked together as a family. They had a group, they had a village, so to speak,
Yeah.
of people who were willing and wanted to help take care of them. But everybody doesn't have that. But caregivers, if you're a caregiver out there for any situation, um, my hat's off to you because it's a difficult job, and I know that.
Yeah.
And it's a full time job in the respect that either you have to be there with them, or if you're not, you might always be wondering in the back of your mind
Mm.
who they're calling today,
Right,
right?
right,
Or what
right.
they're doing. And so this says caregivers depend on God. The role of caregivers is a friendship at its finest. Caregivers put another's needs above their own, often with few pats on the back or words of encouragement in this life. However, as Ruth from the book of Ruth in the Bible cared for her aging mother in law, Naomi, she learned to depend on God's strength and reap the blessings of sacrificial love. Just think about that. Ruth's story illustrates how God gives both eternal and earthly rewards for our devotion to those in our care. About makes me cry
I know.
because I know God's going to bless you, and He already has,
Yes.
but will continue to. It is God's desire that all people, regardless of their earthly status, all people mentally ill, sick, whatever, be treated with dignity. And that we really find that in our society, they haven't always been treated that way. And if you feel marginalized, rest assured that God cares for you and there's a seat for you at the banquet in the kingdom of God. So if you're suffering from mental illness, know that God loves you. And that comes from Luke 14:12 through 14. Know that you are loved just as much as anybody on this earth. And that I just pray that God will send someone to help you like Christine's helping her sister. So,
Yeah, so I guess I need to start with some history,
yeah.
And so when you look at um, my history, it's a very small family. My mom and dad, my sister and I. My dad was kind of an only child, and so it was a very small family. But just God blessed me tremendously with just wonderful upbringing, wonderful parents.
Yes.
A prayer warrior of a mother who basically prayed over us every single day. And we really saw that in our life. And just a shout out to praying moms. Man,
Yeah.
that's a powerful
Yes,
to have
it
a
is.
praying mom. And my sister, she was born with a learning disability. She was not born mentally ill. She had a learning disability, and she had a childlike spirit, and she had this beautiful light in her. She would talk to anybody, and my mom, being that prayer warrior, prayed over us as children, and you could really see that with my sister, because my sister was very interesting in that she had this beautiful light in school, and because she was different than the other kids. Kids are cruel.
Kids can be very cruel.
And bullying is a real thing, and it happened back then and happens today. It's a sad thing.
It is.
But for my sister, my mom must have prayed some filter over her eyes, because she didn't realize people were making fun of her, the kids. She felt like they were playing, and with her childlike spirit and that beautiful light, she never did really feel that, and to the point where she absolutely loves school. And she received probably an award that I don't know if anybody has received, but she never missed one day of school in 12 years. And so at graduation, she got this special award. But that just shows you that light and that spirit of just loving life and loving people. And even though she was at school, and back then they put them in special ed classes.
Yeah.
And so, but during that time period, there was a guy in her high school that fell in love with her learning disability, and they got married, and had a daughter very quickly after they got married, and then that started her new journey, of trying to be a mom with a learning disability. Was doing the best she could,
Right.
And my niece's dad was her rock for sure. He knew that when he married her, that he was going to have to kind of pivot in ways that some husbands don't have to pivot, but he loved her for who she is and who she was, and they enjoyed life. And then, as as the time was going by, loss started to take place. And so in one year we had 5 losses, and in a 6-month period. And anybody that has had losses, multiple losses, it's difficult.
Yes, it is.
I mean, it's difficult for the average person, but for somebody with a learning disability, you're not getting over grief before you're into grief again, and and you really don't ever get over grief. But having it five, deaths in 6 months, was just it was a lot to handle when it came to grief. But God is really powerful and good, and as we went through it, we didn't really understand it, but looking back, those deaths fell in an order. I think God knew for sure what was ahead of my sister, and
Yeah.
based on those deaths and the orders in which they took place, it helped from an estate for my sister, and in helping her financially to be, because that fifth death was her husband at a very young age, and so at that point, that was difficult. That was the very last one in that series, in that 6 month period. And my mom and I are stepping in with my niece, with my sister, and wrapping our arms around her. She had just graduated from high school and had just started her freshman year, literally the first week of school. And so with that, we ended up, they lived in a different state, and because of the way all this worked out, we ended up being able to move my sister back to Birmingham, and in a house, and kind of get her and my niece situated for the next chapter of their life.
Yeah.
And in watching that, it was very complicated um, for my sister and my niece to navigate. But my mom, the prayer warrior that she was, was also praying over my niece ever since she was a baby, and you could kind of see God working beautifully in her life as well. And so, one of the things that happened when her dad passed away was a lot of school loans. My mom, my mom basically put an account aside to make sure that my niece was going to be debt free from college. Of course, my niece did not know that, and then as the losses started taking place, we're dealing with grief, not realizing my sister's light is, not as bright as we're moving through it. And my mom ended up unexpectedly passing away at the beginning of my niece's senior year in college. Um, I think when I said my mom's a prayer warrior, she basically prayed every day of her life that she wouldn't suffer in old age. And that gave me peace. I wish she'd have prayed differently, maybe a different age than 69, but that's what she prayed. She went to visit her grandmother in a nursing home that was in a semi-coma for over a year. Wow. And she went every weekend religiously to see her, and that's when my mom started praying that she would not suffer in old age, and she did not suffer at all. Unexpectedly, she passed away. She was never on any meds. I mean, it was just a beautiful life, living for the Lord. Huge prayer warrior. But my peace comes knowing that my mom did not suffer at all in old age. But so as my sister has now lost her second rock, husband being the first rock, my mom being the second rock, it's getting more complicated. We're still not realizing the mental illness piece of it. We're seeing the learning disability come out, but really the mental illness is starting to creep in, to the point that we're dealing with our own grief. And I think that's what happens a lot of times. We deal with our own grief, and we have people around us that probably need more help.
Right.
And sometimes you can't necessarily see it. But, God is just unbelievable in this story when my mom passes away, and I call it God hugs throughout that year to kind of help me get through the grief. I was extremely close with my mom. In that grieving process with my mom passing, God gave me these hugs throughout that year. And one of them is just an incredible story. It's just very hard to kind of comprehend. It's one of those times in life that I felt like time just stopped. I mean, that at that moment it just stopped, and it was at my niece's graduation, and we were at the hotel. My niece is there. I have made this gift from her grandmother to say she's going to be debt free. I've made this certificate and I've wrapped it up, and my sister's there, my husband, and my dad. And my dad doesn't normally wear a suit, and he's wearing a suit and he's getting ready, and all of a sudden we hear him kind of yelp and say, something's just pricked the fire out of my finger. And in my suit pant pocket, and I'm like, well, Dad, you really need to get that out, because you're going to be sitting and that's going to be painful. And so he reached in and he pulled out my mom's basically red fishing hook. My dad did not fish at all. My mom was the one who had her own little bass boat, and it was a really interesting story. My dad would be under an umbrella watching a video while my mom's fishing on the boat, but she only fished with this red fishing hook. That was her hook. And
That's crazy.
And at that moment in time, we all it went quiet. It's almost like time just stood still, and we're trying to comprehend what just took place. And of course my niece yells out, my granny's here. And you just love that, when a child is, and even though she's in college, but she yells out, my granny's here. It's just one of those things in life. It's just so hard to comprehend. And it's just beautiful, because that's why I call it my God hugs, because we had several of those things that happened that year, but that one was just, beyond being able to comprehend.
Well, you know that there's no reason for a fishing hook to be in his dress suit pants.
That hangs upside down with a jacket around it. Yes.
Especially.
That's right.
I mean, if it had maybe been in something he would wear out on the boat, you might understand it, but there are some things we'll never understand except to know that it is divine.
Yes.
And that God has performed that. I don't want to digress, but did you tell me a story about an owl?
Yeah, so, oh my gosh, yeah, so that was the first thing that happened. The day we actually buried my mom, an owl showed up. My mom loved birds. I mean, loved birds. She had all these bird feeders, and she fed the birds. She did not like the squirrels. She did not like the chipmunks.
No.
She even had them where if the squirrel landed on it, it had a mechanical battery and it swung them off, And but this owl showed up the day we buried my mom, and it stayed there for 7 days. It took care of all the chipmunks and squirrels in the yard. We didn't have any squirrels or chipmunks for months, But it literally would be 10 feet between us, and it would just watch us day and night, sit on the deck, on the edge of the deck. It was just an unbelievable, story. I've never seen that owl before, and I've never seen it after, just those 7 days. That just put a smile on our face as we're grieving the loss of my mom, and which is a beautiful story. But as we kind of, keep moving past, the loss of my mom, then my sister is now dealing with the loss of her daughter, meaning not in terms of physical loss, but she moved.
Okay.
She married somebody from college on the East Coast that happened to be probably the only boy clear across country on the West Coast. So she up and moved to Seattle. And so, you kind of look at that. Now she's got a third rock that is gone. And, even though she's still here, but, there's something about grief for empty nesters in terms of parents and empty nesters. And so for her, to have these losses coming pretty quick during this time period, she begins to, the light is about
Right.
to go out. And she had this little dog that was her favorite, and that was the fourth little rock, because now everybody's left and it's just her and her dog, and then the dog. And there's a lot of grief around dogs.
Oh, people.
Pets are huge
Yeah.
companionships, and so she loses her dog, and now we've now full blown into mental illness, and the light is almost gone, and you know um, and then it becomes very hard, and I will tell you, when you my sister, let me see, oh, let's see here, this is give you kind of a face with you know and these are activities. It's my precious dad, and we were taking trips, having that sister relationship, and snowmobiling. That was the last time we took a trip together, which was when she turned 50,
Mm.
and which was 10 years ago. She just turned 60. And so after that, we had no idea on how beautiful that trip was from a memory perspective. Um, but very short after that, 4 years after that, we've been 6 years with her not leaving her home.
Wow.
And she has become a total recluse. And so when my dad passed away, which was 6 years ago, was her last rock in her mind. And then the light went out. And when it went out, we now have mental illness, full blown. But and then one thing that I've talked to Debbie about, when people are mentally ill, they don't know they're mentally ill.
That's a good point.
A lot of times, I mean, she thinks she is fine.
Yeah.
She has multiple personalities, and so one of those personalities is she's running for president, which is very interesting. And she'll do a speech, and she thinks she's in different states. I mean, if anybody has seen the movie A Beautiful Mind, it's very hard to, in their mind, to decipher what's real and what's not. And so for the past almost 5 years, our life has been a battle, meaning a sister battle. And so you go through the grief of losing that sister relationship. Yeah. It's non-existent. So even though she's still
so sad
here,
to me.
I know, even though she's still here, she's really gone, mentally, in terms of those relationships with her daughter, with myself, her grandkids she has not seen. She is totally reclused into her home. We take her groceries. We take care of her house, her bills, everything, from a caregiver perspective. But it was a battle, Debbie. A battle in terms of, I felt like I was going into battle every time we walk in that house, because the anger, there's no light, there's so much anger, and yelling and screaming. I know the neighbors are like, oh my gosh, what's going on in there? And one day it was very interesting. We all go to church, we hear Bible verses, we read Bible verses. And, one day, I was at church around a year ago. And the verse from Philippians 4, 6, and 7, which just basically says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Man, I've heard that voice, I've heard that verse, and I've heard that verse, but that day the light bulb went off. And that light bulb was, I was trying to control the last 5 years of that relationship, and try to control that situation. And this told me I need to give her over to God.
Absolutely.
I can't control it. Right. And so God put it on our heart, we needed to surrender her, and then we need to pray first.
Yes.
And then we need to believe it.
Yeah. Accept it, receive it.
That's right. And then we need to praise it. Praise Him. Give praise. And so that's what changed, totally turned for us, um, and gave me peace.
Finally,
Finally,
peace.
peace. And until I got that peace, it was just like this. It was very hard for me to
Mhm.
understand the relationship that we had before we no longer have.
Mhm.
And you're right, being a caregiver, it's the thankless job.
It's
You
hard.
you go into battle and she's hateful and she's mean and she yells and screams and then you just go back for it again.
And tells you you're taking advantage of her,
Yes,
and tells
yes.
you that
I'm
you're,
stealing from her,
yeah.
even though she has a house that's
Yeah.
paid for and bills and all that, but everything just hitting every single, and you just keep going back. And until I surrendered her and
Right.
turned
Thank
it
you,
over,
Jesus.
the peace came over, and I would go in, and no matter what she said, it did not matter. And I slept. I wasn't, I just gave me this peace that is very hard. But then, we literally now pray
Mm-hmm.
at the door before we go in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we're praising on the way out.
That's
We're like, high
that's
five God,
good
high
work.
five God, because in the last year we have had peaceful meetings. So once we kind of surrendered her, these meetings are not as hard, and we
Mm-hmm.
don't. The battle is not
Mm-hmm.
there, and how many times do we try to control something and we keep trying to control it, and it just keeps not going our way, and we don't understand, but God's in control. We just
That's
need to
you
surrender it.
allow him, because
That's right.
we take it back, and he doesn't really need our help.
No.
But he needs our not sacrifice, but he needs us to release it to him, right?
Yeah.
And I just want to say right now that I know there are people out there who will be listening to this video, because since we decided to do this, I've had some people reach out to me. And if you are not able to do that, then you you will still be fighting the battle yourself. And I just want to encourage you to receive the help that God is sending your way, and to turn your loved one over to the Lord, because I know you're suffering.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you are uh, at your wits' end, and don't know what to do anymore. But you keep going around the same mountain and
Mm-hmm.
around the same mountain and around the same mountain. But only God can deliver you from that. And Christine is a beautiful testimony to
Mm.
that.
It's hard.
Oh, I know.
I will tell you, because you sometimes feel like you give it over, but you grab it back.
Oh, that's what we do with a lot of things.
We give it and then we grab, and just to totally release her, and then to believe,
Mm-hmm.
and
It's
that's
true.
the other side to it. You gotta believe it
And then give God the
and
glory.
give God the glory.
And when you keep giving him the glory, it's just a way of not only praising him, but reminding you that
Mm-hmm.
you've released that. Um, I heard it told once that someone was having trouble forgiving themselves for something, and they saw a counselor, and the counselor said, "How many times have you asked God to forgive you for that?"
Mm-hmm.
And they just said, "Every time I pray, you know." And he said, "God forgave you the first time."
Right.
And that's just it. God will take that from you the first time if you will really, truly release it.
Release. That's right.
Just like you have to release not forgiving yourself. The past is gone.
That's right.
And so from today.
Yeah. So I think it has given me so much peace and has given me hope in a very dark situation. And now I see light, as before I did not see light.
Yeah.
In the situation, we pray for her healing.
Sure.
But at the same time, I know that God's in control. As before, I was in control,
Mm-hmm.
and but yeah, it's hard. But at the same time, man, is there just a reward
Mm-hmm.
when you kind of release and pray and believe and then give that praise.
Now that you said that, I feel like I have to share this in Ruth chapter 1, verse 20 and 21. Accepting God's will, God's goodness, and sovereignty can be difficult to grasp, especially when it comes to suffering. Yet the Bible clearly teaches us that nothing can remove us from God's loving protection in the palm of His hand. He knows how we will respond to an illness, accident, or injury, and He provides His grace and guidance in each trial to ultimately accomplish His purposes.
That's right.
And that's what you were saying, that
Yep.
He has a purpose, He has a reason. We don't always understand it, but
Yeah.
He knows more than we do. He sees the whole puzzle.
That's
We
right.
just see pieces.
Yeah. It's very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Gives you a lot of hope
Yeah.
and a lot of peace.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before there was not any hope or peace.
I'm glad you did that. I'm so proud of you.
It's hard, but man, the reward was huge. Um, as I will be going to visit her in a few minutes when I leave here, and so as before, there was just so much anxiety, and now, you just have that peace. Even though, we might have one bad situation here and there, it still gives me peace that knowing that God's got this.
God's got this, as He does
Yes.
anything and everything in our lives if we will just allow Him to
That's right.
do that.
That's right. Hopefully this helps someone. I know it's part of my story. It's didn't think I would be sitting here.
I'm
in this
glad you are.
situation,
Well, not in this situation, but
but
I'm
yeah.
glad you're sharing. And
But there's a lot of grief with mental illness, and I think we just have to surrender that person that's mentally ill, and give it over, and have that peace when you're caregiving for somebody. Because there's dementia and Alzheimer's. There's all these that our loved one is now not that same relationship, and it's hard.
it's hard.
To grieve someone that's still living, which
Oh.
sometimes, and that's where we are.
Mhm.
When somebody's mentally ill, you're grieving someone that's still here,
Yeah.
but they're not still here, like you are accustomed.
Yeah.
Same thing with addiction and all that other. It's
Yeah,
not
that's
that,
true.
it's
That's
still
true.
not. There's so many different
That's
ways
true.
that people grieve somebody that is still living.
The person has lost themselves, therefore, you've lost them.
That's correct.
And it's hard. I know with my mom with dementia. Before she passed away, I just prayed. I said, Lord, I felt like she was in almost a living hell because she was so confused and so frightened. And I just knew heaven would be a better place for her then, as it is really even for all of us now.
But doesn't that give you peace, though?
Tremendous
Yeah,
peace.
yeah.
And He took her not very long after that. And I'm so thankful to Him. Aren't you thankful to Him for what all He's done in your lives and what all He's going to do? And God is just good all the time, right?
Yes, yes. We just have to remember and believe and anchor ourselves. Isn't that the word we learned yesterday? Anchor ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, 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 yes.
Keep anchored
Mm-hmm.
in the Word.
Just makes me want to sing. But I'm not going to.
That is not a gift.
Christine told me she wasn't going to sing a while ago.
That is not a gift.
Music is such a part of my life that, I mean, all the time somebody else say something and I'll think of a song that goes with that. And I have to just control myself.
I love it. I love it.
Well, I love you guys out there. I know Christine does too. And that her heart is just in the right place to come before you and share this today. So I will tell you to like or subscribe or both. And I only say that because it will alert you to the next video. And maybe that can help you or someone you love. So we'll say goodbye for now. But God bless you abundantly.
Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you.